Greetings, everyone. Today I'm giving a presentation on a cultural event that happened in the US, the 13-minute, 41-second Super Bowl halftime show by Bad Bunny in the US in February 2026. The title of the paper is A Love Letter to America, Bad Bunny Super Bowl Halftime Show. Decolonial political economy of contradictions, hegemonic incorporation, and imperial reproduction. That's the outline of the paper. For the introduction, this paper looks at the Super Bowl halftime show as a US imperial media apparatus. It has an empirical case study of the Bad Bunny performance using Spanish language with Puerto Rican symbolism and gender disruption. The structural context is Puerto Rico is a U.S. unincorporated territory. Problem statement is cultural visibility of colonial difference increases, however, structural relations of power remain unchanged. The problematic of this paper is contradiction is expressed through, on the one hand, the decolonial expression of the Latin language performance versus the imperial incorporation to the hegemony. The research gap is not one author had really looked at the Bad Bunny from the point of view of looking at contradiction, hegemonic incorporation, and reproduction of the political economy. So this paper took it upon itself to look at these three elements which are absent in the research. RQs 1 to 3, the contradictions, the hegemonic incorporation, and the reproduction of the imperial political economy. The literature which guided this paper, as it is theory driven, are from many classical, well known authors from the different traditions. And it looked at the contradiction of two very powerful elements: domination versus consent, standardization versus autonomy, encoding versus decoding, coloniality versus modernity, epistemic difference versus Western dominance, descent versus capture, identity versus market, and value versus labor. So a lot of contributions have been given by the authors cited. However, there are a lot of limitations in this paper. The What this paper did was to synthesize all of the gaps, and they were not able to link them up together. And this paper provided the integrated framework, which is the following: colonial difference, that's the contradiction; commodification, that is the hegemonic incorporation; and imperial reproduction, that is into the uh, political economy of the dominant class. The theoretical framework, therefore, as they all are arranged with one-to-one alignment: contradiction to colonial difference, incorporation to commodification, reproduction to imperial reproduction of the political economy. And the methodology of this paper is guided by the following: research design, it is a qualitative, theory-driven, critical case study. And the data collection method includes performance observation through social media, including TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and television. The discourses about the performance, that's 3 minute or so performance in the media, as well as scholarly literature. The procedure was to look at the three things: one, the contradictions; two, the hegemonic incorporation; and three, to evaluate the reproduction of the political economy. And the analytic logic is abduction. Whatever works, we will come up with how they were able to resolve the contradictions and the tension, with theory leading the interpretation. Accuracy and consistency are made possible through the triangulation of the theories used. The limitation of this paper is it does not have quantitative metrics. It did not look at, for example, the Nielsen rating on how many people watch the show live on live cast simultaneously or thereafter. And this paper is only interpretive in its paradigm. Findings of the paper. RQ1, contradictions. So between the Hispanophone versus the Anglophone. And then you have the Puerto Rican identity, which was shown, as well as its contradiction to the US imperial framing. Gender fluidity, Bad Bunny, versus heteronormativity of the dominant class. RQ2, the hegemonic incorporation. There is cultural disruption. At the same time, it's in tension with it's a effort for profit making. And then there's inclusion of the minority, Latinidad. However, it is also in tension with legitimizing the dominant group by incorporating it into the Super Bowl. RQ3, on the question of reproduction, well, this is a form of cultural resistance, but in fact, it is incorporated into the dominant uh, discourse through the incorporation into the Super Bowl. There is visibility of the Latino and Puerto Rican culture, but it is really, in fact, not controlling, as it does not have the power of the media, the ownership of media, and of the political economy. Discussion of the findings. The authors, which have been used in this paper, have had great contribution to our knowledge production. However, this paper did not only blindly apply, but it extended the literature by saying that in this case, the Bad Bunny Super Bowl show was able to show us the tension that this paper had provided. For example, if you look at the yellow highlighted portion of this slide, consent was provided because although it is a cultural minority, they were commodified and included into the Super Bowl show. It is money making of all things at the end of the day, and it is a selective incorporation of difference. And there is agency, the ability of Bad Bunny to insist, I will only sing in Spanish, which he did. They almost tried to kick him out, but of the Super Bowl. But he said, I'm not changing my show. However, there's no structural transformation. And then coloniality is reproduced through the commodification in the mass media. The spectacle of the Super Bowl halftime show only shows it is nothing but a capture mechanism. They were able to get the minorities so that there would be more market and therefore more profit because Bad Bunny is the number one performer all around the world, all over the world, not just in the US. And also value can be extracted from cultural difference. So although they're a minority, they're given a slot in the Super Bowl, so it's profit making at the end of the day. Further discussion includes number one, a cultural difference is not suppressed but structurally absorbed. And this paper was able to add to the Bad Bunny literature by adding the elements of incorporation to the hegemony and reproduction of the political economy. So difference is not eliminated but intensified for profit, and inclusion only legitimizes further the imperial control of the political economy. Limitation is only a single case study and it's only interpretive, but it contributed to theory by bridging together three aspects: one, decolonial theory; two, political economy; and three, media studies. Contribution to practice: this paper asks us to reframe the cultural representation debate towards structural ownership, not just representation, because representation without redistribution is insufficient. In conclusion, this paper had discussed three elements: contradiction, hegemonic incorporation, and reproduction of the political economy. At the end of the day, the cultural visibility only led to imperial reproduction, not structural change. There are three sets of recommendations for policy, for practice, and for research. Thank you very much for your kind attention.